So let us look at the nutrition in human beings. It's carried out by a complex and well-organized system, a well-organized structure called the alimentary canal. So the process of digestion, the process of nutrition takes place in this alimentary canal. So this is a long tube-like structure. Let us see the description, the various parts of the human alimentary canal. The human alimentary canal begins at the mouth and it ends at the anus. It is a long coiled tube which has got various modifications. You can see the difference of the tube here. At this region it is like a bag-like structure. Again it is like some pipe-like structure in the intestines. So this way this long coiled tube is extended from mouth to the anus. So it is modified into different shapes as it has to perform different functions at each stage, at each place. And one more thing we can observe here, this alimentary canal is associated with some glands. Different glands are attached to this alimentary canal. You can see the liver, it is attached to the human alimentary canal, and the gallbladder and pancreas. Pancreas is also attached. So these glands, they secrete some secretions. They pour their secretions into the alimentary canal, which help in the chemical digestion part. So now let us see the various parts. It starts with mouth and the long extending tube from the mouth to the stomach. This tube is called as esophagus. It is also called as food pipe. And here the esophagus is connected to the stomach. So the esophagus, it is passing through a muscular wall which separates the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity. This is the abdominal cavity and this is the chest cavity. Both are separated by a muscular valve called as diaphragm. So the diaphragm, this esophagus, it passes through the diaphragm and it enters into the stomach. Stomach is a muscular bag-like structure in which the process of digestion takes place, physical digestion. So from the stomach, you can see that at the end of the stomach, glands are connected like liver, pancreas, all are connected, and it continues as small intestine, and the small intestine, it continues as large intestine, and the undigested food is passed through the large intestine, reaches the rectum, and from there through anus it is excreted out. So here are the various parts of the human alimentary canal. Now let us see the process of digestion in humans. That is, the various kinds of changes happens to the food in the human alimentary canal. Let us begin with the mouth. The food we take, it has got different textures. We eat apples, we eat bananas, we eat rice, we eat chapatis. So in this way we eat different kinds of food. Each has got different texture, different level of hardness, different amount of water in them. Some foods are very dry, some foods are very hard like nuts, some foods are very soft and juicy, watery. So all these foods are to be made uniform. The complex parts or bits of food should be made into simple and easy to absorb material. So the food has to be made into a fine form, smooth and soft form. So from there the nutrients can be easily absorbed into the blood circulatory system, into the body. So this is achieved by this total apparatus, the digestion of the food. Here the food has to be converted into smaller bits. That takes place by a process called mastication, chewing of food. So whatever the food we take, just we do not swallow it. If you see birds, they do not swallow, they don't have teeth. Birds, they swallow the grains. But it is not like in case of birds. In human digestive system, first chewing takes place. So as soon as you keep the food in your mouth, you have to chew the food. What happens to the food in the mouth? Here, two kind of things happen in the mouth. One is physical change takes place to the food, and the second one is chemical. Chemical change takes place to the food. One is physical change, the other one is chemical change. What is the physical change that happens to the food? So with the help of the structures present in our mouth, what are the various structures we have? We have teeth, tongue. These are the two structures that help to make the food into smaller bits. That is, we have different types of teeth like incisors, canines, premolars and molars to cut, tear, grind and chew the food. And tongue helps to move the food in a proper way, so by that the food is properly distributed under the teeth and it is thoroughly mixed with the other liquid, important liquid, that is secreted, saliva. So saliva is a liquid that is secreted by the salivary glands in our mouth. This saliva gets mixed up with the food, so it makes the food into a paste. So all the food is uniformly ground into a fine paste by chewing. So it makes the food soft. So by that we can easily swallow it. If it is not soft, you cannot swallow. So this is achieved by this saliva. So the physical digestion, that means the hard bits of food is made into smooth, soft, bolus. So by that it can easily pass through the esophagus. So that is what happens in the mouth, the physical part. And what about the chemical part? So physically the food is made into soft form. Chemically, what happens to the food? The food we are chewing, what we are chewing is well mixed with a liquid called saliva. Saliva not only helps to make the food watery, not only helps to make the food paste, it also contains certain enzymes called salivary amylase. Salivary amylase. So this is a chemical compound, an enzyme which act on the certain nutrients like carbohydrates that we eat in our food. So partially a bit of digestion takes place in the mouth itself. Food is partially digested in the mouth. Which part of the food? Carbohydrates are partly digested, that is by the action of salivary amylase. This salivary amylase, it digests the carbohydrates into simpler form, some simpler form. So the food is processed physically as well as chemically in the mouth. So once the food is made into a fine paste and a part of food is digested by salivary amylase, now the food is bolus and it is ready to be swallowed, sent down into the next part of the alimentary canal. So now here the food which is chewed well is made into a paste, soft. So this soft paste kind of food is easily passed in the esophagus. But how does this paste, the bolus food, moves in the esophagus? So esophagus is a long tube which is lined by some mucus. It is a long tube, but even then the food cannot simply pass in the esophagus because the food is not completely watery. The food is not completely a liquid. It is a paste kind of thing. So it has to be moved down in the esophagus. So that is achieved by the circular muscles present in the esophagus. So the esophagus has got longitudinal and circular muscles which produce a wave-like contractions and relaxations. So this kind of contractions and relaxations, if this is the food, so they have a contraction and relaxation. The circular muscles present here, they contract and push the food downwards. And the longitudinal muscles, they contract and relax. So the circular and longitudinal muscles contract and relax and push the food downwards. So these contractions and relaxations are wave-like and they are called as peristaltic movements. Peristaltic movements. So these peristaltic movements help the food to pass through the esophagus into the stomach. There is no digestion in the esophagus. Esophagus is just a passage, a tube through which the food passes from mouth to the stomach. That's all. So no other digestion takes place in this part. Only the peristaltic movements push the food downwards into the stomach. Now let us look at the features of the stomach. Stomach is a sac-like or a bag-like organ. It expands as soon as the food enters into it. It increases in size. It is a stretchable organ, muscular organ. So the food enters into the stomach. So even in the stomach, just like in mouth. In case of mouth, we have seen the food is digested in two ways. One is physical and second one is chemical. There is chemical processing, physical processing. In the same way, the stomach also does the grinding in two ways. Physical, grinding the food, churning the food, making the food into very soft and soft and soft. The fine paste called as chyme. So then the fine paste can enter the intestines for the remaining process. So that is the physical part of the stomach. What does it do physically? It churns the food. So the walls of this stomach, they secrete some kind of substances. The walls of the stomach consist of gastric glands which secrete HCl, hydrochloric acid, and pepsin, an enzyme, and mucus. What does this HCl do? It helps in the digestion of proteins. And at the same time, pepsin, an enzyme, it helps in the digestion of proteins. It converts the proteins into peptones and mucus. So the hydrochloric acid which is secreted into the stomach, this hydrochloric acid, it provides an acidic medium for the process of digestion, and that at the same time it kills the bacteria that enter the stomach through the food. So we are eating the food which may contain bacteria. So these bacteria are killed by the action of this hydrochloric acid. So that is the function of this HCl and pepsin. Then what does this mucus do? Mucus, it lines the walls of the stomach. It gives a protective layer for the walls, so by that the walls are not damaged by the HCl. So sometimes if there is any problem with the mucus, if the mucus layers are degenerated or spoiled, then we feel some burning sensation in the stomach. It may lead to some kind of lesions in the stomach which are called as ulcers or gastric problem, burning sensation in the stomach. That is the problem with the secretion and the layers of the mucus. So generally the mucus is secreted to protect the inner walls of the stomach from the action of this HCl. So inside the stomach, the proteins are partially digested, proteins are converted into peptones and other form, and the gastric juices, they chemically as well as physically, the food is digested, made into very soft and fine form. So here, till the food is made into soft form, it is not released into the intestine. Who controls that? Here is a sphincter, pyloric sphincter. So the sphincter, it will not allow the food till it is completely made into soft. So once the food is made into soft, paste-like one called as chyme, the sphincter muscles slowly release some amount of food into the intestines. The food is not released as a whole into the intestines. The food is released part by part by the pyloric sphincter. Sphincter is a valve kind of thing made up of muscles. It slowly releases the food from the stomach. The lower part of the stomach has got the finer food which is made into fine paste. Here the upper part, it contains the food which is having bigger particles. Still it is digesting. But here it is completely fine food is formed. So the fine form is slowly enters into the intestine through this pyloric sphincter. The sphincter slowly releases the food into the small intestine. Now let us see what happens to the food in the small intestine. So the food which is made into fine paste called as chyme is sent into this small intestine through this sphincter. So the food at which it is attached to the small intestine, there we can see some glands are attached to the alimentary canal. One is liver and other one is pancreas. So these two glands, liver and pancreas, they secrete their secretions into the small intestine. So these secretions, they also help in the chemical part of digestion. If you look at the pancreas, here we find the pancreas. So the pancreas, it secretes pancreatic juice which consists of trypsin and lipase, these enzymes. So the trypsin and lipase, the trypsin helps in the breakdown of proteins to peptones, lipase helps in breakdown of lipids. Anyway, initially the lipids, as they are in the form of a big molecules or a big droplets, they cannot be easily digested by lipase. So that reason, the liver secretes a substance called as bile. The bile, it carries out a process called emulsification. After emulsification, the lipids are digested by the lipase. What is this emulsification? Say for example, if you take a glass of water and in the water you kept some drops of oil. So this oil, it floats on the water, and how do you find the oil? Like big droplets, like coins. So in the same way, if you eat some oily food, some puri, some chapati, something which has got much oil, so this oil also floats in your stomach in the liquids in the form of big droplets. So if the fat is in the form of big droplets, the enzymes, they cannot act. They need more surface. If it is a very big droplet, the enzymes on the surface, they cannot break the fats. They must be formed into small droplets. then more enzyme can act on it. So the breakdown of big fat droplets into tiny droplets is emulsification. You are given a glass of water and some oil poured on it, and you are asked to make the oil into very fine droplets. What do? You will try to shake it. So even though by physical shaking, the oil cannot be broken down to small droplets, again the small droplets join together to form big droplets. Then if you mix some amount of detergent powder, some surf, detergent powder to this glass, then the detergent powder, it makes the oil droplets very small. This is called as emulsification. So that is what happens in our intestine by the action of the bile salts. So the bile juices are secreted by the liver, which contain bile salts and bile acids. These bile juices, they help in the emulsification of fats, making the big fat globules into tiny particles. So by that, the enzymes like lipase, they act on the fat particle. It can be digested to fatty acids. So fats are the complex molecules and fatty acids are the simpler molecules. So these complex fats are converted to simple fatty acids. So the fatty acids can be absorbed in the small intestine into the bloodstream. And trypsin, it converts the big protein molecules into small peptones. But even then, the peptones cannot be absorbed into our blood. They should be broken down into still smaller. That is achieved by the other hormones secreted by the intestinal juice. The walls of the intestine, small intestine, also secrete some juices which contain the peptidases, sucrases, maltases, lipase, intestinal lipase. So these peptidases, they convert the peptones into amino acids. So the digestion is finalized in the small intestine. It is completely digested. No more digestion is required. The complex food is made into very fine and simple molecules which can be easily absorbed into the blood. So these enzymes like peptidases, they convert the peptones to amino acids. Sucrases, they convert the sucrose into glucose. Maltases convert the maltose into glucose. And intestinal lipase converts the fats into fatty acids. So these are the very simple molecules. Fatty acids, amino acids and glucose. These are the very simple molecules. So all the complex food which we have eaten is broken down in the mouth. It is churned in the stomach. It is made into very fine paste. The fine paste is mixed with many chemicals and chemical digestion took place. Finally, that food which we ate, it turned into very simple substances like amino acids, fatty acids, glucose. Now they are ready for absorption. So for this complete process of digestion in the small intestine, these glands and their secretions are helping. Pancreatic juices and liver secretes bile, and intestinal juice or succus entericus, it consists of these hormones it consists of these enzymes which digest the food completely. So the digestion of the food completes in the small intestine. Small intestine is a very long organ and coiled. Even though it is very long, it fits in a very small space because of its coiling. So because of the coiling, the lengthy intestine is fit in a small space. So the length of the small intestine, it varies in different animals, depends upon the food they eat. Certain animals, they only eat meat, flesh of other animals. So they don't need very large small intestine because meat can be easily digested in a shorter time. So the length of the small intestine can be small. But whereas the animals like cow and buffalo which eat only grass, the grass consists of cellulose, it requires very long time for digestion. So they need a very long small intestine. So the length of the small intestine is varied in different animals. It depends upon the food they eat. Anyway, the process of digestion is completed in the small intestine. Now what happened to the undigested food? So now what happens to the undigested food? The undigested food is sent into the large intestine. So what about the digested food? The food is digested and made into very small and simple and absorbable form in the small intestine. Now, the nutrients from this digested food are absorbed into the bloodstream, blood circulation, because blood has to transport the nutrients to each and every cell for maintenance, for repair and for other purposes. So, if you see the cross section of small intestine, this is the wall of the small intestine. The small intestine has got so many foldings, finger-like structures. So why this many foldings are there here? This is to increase the area of absorption. If the surface is folded, there is more area for absorption. Nutrients can be absorbed. So here we can find some microvilli, tiny finger-like structures. If you see the finger-like structure in an enlarged microscope or something, in enlarged view, it will be like this, and all around the nutrients are absorbed, and inside the villi it is richly supplied with blood vessels. Blood vessels. So these blood vessels, they absorb the nutrients here, and these nutrients are supplied to the blood circulatory system, the bloodstream. They are supplied to different cells. So from the digested food, the nutrients are absorbed, the water is absorbed. So these nutrients and water and everything is absorbed, and the remaining undigested food with some nutrients which are not absorbed and some water enters into the large intestine. So in the large intestine, the water is reabsorbed into the body, into the blood, because the water is needed for other purposes, other activities. The food, the undigested food is hardened, and this hardened food moves through the large intestine all around the colon, and it reaches the rectum and finally excreted through anus. If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.